Good morning, afternoon, or evening, folks, and welcome to Cast of All Trades, the show where we talk about developing skills, exploring ideas, and following curiosity. I'm your host, Orion Siebert, and in this episode, I'm joined by Dr. David Langemo, an expert in the topic of destructive leadership. Dr. Langemo is also experienced in the world of nonprofit business. Now he strives to educate and help organizations know what to do about destructive leaders that may have infiltrated their ranks. In this episode, we discuss different types of leaders, the possible consequences of destructive leaders running amok in your organization, what you can do about it, and much more. I had an absolutely fantastic time sitting down with Dr. Langemo this past week. Leadership is a topic that I don't really know all that much about outside of the world of psychology and a little bit in the world of business, but really that's not my ballpark. So it was a great time for me to sit down and talk with him about this topic of leadership, both from the perspective of what makes for a good leader, someone who can build you up, someone who can really aid an organization and help grow them, compared to a destructive leader who knows what kind of impact they could have both on the organization as a whole and on the individuals who work there. Some of the stories that he told me throughout this episode were fascinating and really hit home, and I was able to learn much more about why leadership really is so important, even for someone like me who probably doesn't delve all that much into the world of leadership and business, and I tend to prefer working alone. But even so, I feel like I've gained something from listening to this episode and listening to Dr. Langemo talk about this subject of his. I hope you stick around and listen to this episode. And if you want more episodes like this, where I talk to experts in their field, learn about what they do and how we can apply it to our daily lives, then definitely subscribe to the show so you don't miss what's coming out next. So, with all that said, and without further ado, let me introduce you to Dr. Langemo. Dr. Langemo, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, David, first of all, before we really get into this, who are you and what do you do? Tell me your story.
Sure. My name is Dr. David Langemo, and I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I have a bachelor's degree in music education and a master's in organizational management and a doctorate in business administration with a specialization in leadership. And I pretty much grew up in Minnesota my whole life.
All right, so today we're here to talk more about that leadership stuff that you've been into, but before we really get into that, but why music? I didn't know about this music side.
Mm. Well, I grew up in a very musical family. There's 6 kids and my 2 parents, and everybody played some sort of musical instrument. I started playing piano in 2nd grade. And then I accompanied my first choir in 5th grade, was asked to teach by the time I was in 9th grade, took organ lessons. So I had this dream that I was always going to be a choir director. And I was for a little bit after I graduated from college. I taught 7th and 8th grade choir and some general music. But then I realized it wasn't for me. So that's how I got into business.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Never would have taken you as a choir director person.
Uh-huh.
You're not like any of the other choir directors I've met, but yeah, story for another time.
More normal, I hope you're thinking.
Yes, surprisingly. So, take me back to that transition of going from music choir director. What got you from there into more business and into more leadership in particular?
Sure. My alma mater for my music degree is Concordia University, and they did a great job of teaching me. But one thing I didn't know, and hardly anybody knows this, is how to deal with parents. I was prepared to deal with students. I could direct a student choir. I could do all of the lesson planning and all those things, but I didn't know what to do with parents. And so I had to get out of there.
So you're saying we're missing a class in colleges for educators on how to deal with parents?
Yes.
Okay, then.
Both those who don't care and those who care too much.
I see.
Because my parents cared, and so that's what I understood. I didn't know how to deal with parents who didn't care what grade their kid got in choir.
Okay.
And
Anyways.
so then, this was way back in the like probably 96, 97. That's when the Best Buy Corporation had adult education classes in some of their stores where they would teach computer classes to adults, maybe
Hmm.
like 5 to 12 adults.
I didn't know
And
that.
since all the classes are gone now, classrooms are gone. But it lasted, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so, 10 years. And they hired me because I had a teaching degree. I knew nothing about computers. So I taught myself Word and Excel and Access. And these are all the early ones like Access 2.0, Word 2.0. It was before the 98s. It was Windows 3.1. And
Still when WordPerfect is dominating things.
yes, Word. I've taught Word Perfect classes, Lotus 1, 2, 3 classes, all those things. So I got into computers. And then I taught computer classes at a technical school in Bloomington, which is now defunct, KRS Computer and Business School. And from there, after they went defunct, I went back to my alma mater, Concordia University, maintained their database of their alumni and donors. And then I just slowly got into leadership from there since I had people reporting to me for the first time.
Okay, so it's more of a forced into this aspect of leadership, going from education in music and working with young students to working with more adults in business, sort of a natural transition into eventually, oh, you're in a leadership position now. I kind of have to learn this thing.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Including conflict management. That was all new to me too.
So leadership, why does it even matter? For so many of us might never be in a leadership position. Like personally, I've had a few different leadership positions throughout my life, and none of them have been super big or super impactful. And I always thought, leadership, it's fine. Either you're a leader or you're not. But why does leadership really matter?
Well, in my opinion, the difference between management and leadership is management is the forwarding of the organization, leadership is the forwarding of the people. Oh my gosh, I should write that down. That's really good. Uh, just kidding. So
Leadership
my
is the
leadership,
forwarding of the.
yeah,
Sorry, one more time.
management is the forwarding of the organization, and leadership is the forwarding of the people in the organization.
Okay,
Uh,
elaborate on that.
Sure. My leadership style, because there are a number of different styles, transformational, transactional. Mine is a servant leadership style, which is very Scandinavian actually, where we believe that instead of working towards goals and being successful at that, which are still very important, I would rather focus on helping my colleagues and those who report to me climb their ladders of success. How can I help them be successful? Build more skills, um, including their soft skills, to get them up to the degree that they want to be at.
Okay, just from what I know about you so far, to me that seems like direct correlation to your educational background, where working with students, that seems like something that at least many of my teachers had, where a lot of them weren't like they didn't always care about the class itself, or they didn't care about many of the explicit goals or goals that other people set for them, but they really cared about working with the students individually to say, what can I do to help this student flourish? That I don't know, to me that's what servant leadership seems like to me and how you're kind of describing it.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I never thought of it that way, but you're exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't important to me when I was teaching choir that the kids learned this particular song. That didn't matter. What mattered was that I could help them learn how to sing that song and what it meant and how to perform those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
I'll say this. I have very little experience with leadership. I maybe took a class on it like a few semesters back, but my knowledge is still very scant. There are a couple ideas that I had as you were talking, and one thing I was reminded of is a trend that started happening a few years back now, where Google and many other tech companies decided that they were going to focus on hiring people with communications degrees, with education degrees, people with more soft skill based degrees to bring them into their engineering, into their more hard skills based things, into coding and all that stuff. And can you guess why? This is relevant. I'm not just going on some random tangent.
Yeah. I'm guessing because of their soft skills. They were, and they probably had a broader horizontal knowledge
Hmm.
than somebody who is so specified.
Exactly. They found that it was much easier to teach the hard skills of coding, of engineering, of math, science, whatever they needed to have this person go do, than it was to teach the soft skills of presenting and teamwork and
Yeah.
leadership and all of this stuff.
Yes.
So that's just hearing your story, that instantly flashed back to me of that makes so much sense of you were brought on by Best Buy to teach how to do computer stuff because you had that teaching experience. It's much
Yes.
easier to take a teacher and have them learn a new thing to teach that than to take someone who knows a technology and have them to try to teach that thing.
Yes, because not everybody can teach.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just went on a big tangent and totally derailed what
Yeah.
where we were, and I don't remember exactly
No,
where we were.
I love it. That's okay.
So, I guess getting back to this leadership, why does it matter?
Yeah. Uh, the other thing that it matters is, unlike management, and sometimes we forget this, or at least it's not always at the tip of my tongue, that leadership means that you are taking an organization or taking people from one spot to another. So you're not maintaining the business, you're growing the business. You're not maintaining somebody's skills, you're improving, increasing their skills. So leadership should always be of movement. So it's a change from a static position to a dynamic thing.
Hmm. Okay. What about from the perspective of someone who maybe isn't a leader in their organization? Why should they care about who their leaders are or what their leaders or managers are like?
I would argue that everybody is a leader in an organization.
Okay. Elaborate on that.
Yeah. I, if we think about introverts, extroverts, ambiverts, everybody fits into one of those things or a combination of those. I know incredibly shy, amazingly, they won't say a word hardly, really difficult for them to have relations with people. And they are a leader because they've got the knowledge. Um, People rely on them and they go to them for the answers that they need. And they're usually very helpful. They're also huge thinkers. I think diversity should include introverts and extroverts and ambiverts so that, along with all of the other things that diversity already includes. So there's a leader on every level of every organization, no matter what their title is. You can be somebody who is going to influence others and to help your colleagues succeed.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Sort of like the leader isn't always the manager. The leader might be the person standing next to you who's like helping you out with your work or trying to lift you up, or maybe just points out a few things that you could improve on.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, sort of stepping on from that, how can like, we've already touched on this a little bit, but how can leadership really impact an organization?
Oofta. That's a loaded question.
Yep, just how they're all
It,
intended to be.
yeah. Every organization has a goal, and some people call it a mission. Some organizations have KPIs. Uh, there's some sort of goal, whether it's a product or a service or a program or something that needs to be accomplished to better the community, or something that the community wants. So the leaders are needed within the organizations, regardless of the level, so that the community can get what it needs or what it wants.
All right.
That is very basic,
Mm-hmm.
the way I described it. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's dig into that a little bit more. Maybe let's look at some different kinds of leadership. So, I know your expertise is in destructive leadership.
Yes.
So let's take a step back. Most people here probably aren't familiar with leadership styles, leadership types. Let's maybe go over a brief summary of what the average person should probably know about some different styles of leadership, just to set a
Sure.
good foundation to work from.
Yeah. Well, probably the most famous or popular type of leadership is transformational leadership. So there we're thinking about people who are they're charismatic leaders, and it's easier for people to follow them. You might think of people like Gandhi or Jesus or um, JFK, Obama. charismatic leaders who are able to transform whatever they are leading uh, into the next rendition that it's supposed to be at, whatever they're leading. Um, and then there are transactional leaders, and they go mainly from, well, as it's called, transaction, from transaction to transaction, which might be more of a, perhaps that's somebody in uh, shipping and handling or supply chain or something like that. And then the servant leader, which I already described, which is like me. Um, and now I'm going to draw a blank on other types of positive leaderships. Yeah.
That's fine. I think that's a pretty good foundation there
Yeah.
of these are some positive kinds of leadership that we might see most commonly. I think there's
Yeah.
maybe one or two more in there, but they're not as big, I think, as these three. So now tying that back to destructive leadership, we have these three kinds of positive leaders. How do they really differ from the destructive leader? Aside from the obvious name of destructive leaders are probably destroying things, wreaking havoc on stuff.
In some form or other, yes. All of them have the word leader in their title, which means that all of them have some sort of follower. You can't be a leader without some sort of follower. So even the destructive leaders have followers, people who might be learning what the destructive leaders are doing and using those tools themselves. They're being manipulative themselves. They're bullying themselves, that kind of thing. So they've all got leader as the same thing. And then destructive leaders are, there's a difference between destructive leaders and bad leaders. A destructive leader has to be somebody where the behavior is systemic and repeated. That's this different from a bad leader or somebody who might make a mistake every once in a while and maybe they'll yell at somebody, but that's, they're just trying to get something off their chest.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a regular behavior for them. But somebody who is repeatedly destructive, who's repeatedly bullying, who's repeatedly perhaps stealing from the company, repeatedly um, manipulating others, um, that's a destructive leader.
Interesting. Something there that you touched on that I guess it just never really processed for me is that they all have the word leadership in there, and that leaders have followers. So, how does the destructive leader, like, what might be some ideas or some examples of how that destructive leader gains their followers? Or,
Oh, yeah. Good question.
because in my mind,
Uh,
I'm thinking, like, well, if they're doing bad for the company, then how are people following them?
right.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, they're actually not doing bad for the company. In some cases, you could have a destructive leader who's very manipulative, but they are able to raise a lot of money for the nonprofit because they are charismatic. Many destructive leaders are very charismatic. People love them. And somehow or other, there are people who appreciate that type of leadership style because maybe they need the fire underneath them or something.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the type where they're a follower because the behavior is normal to them. It's not abnormal. It's something that they're used to. It's always been there. It's been there for years.
It's almost as if they've become numb to it, or sort of a Stockholm
Yes,
syndrome of leadership.
exactly. And then there's another type of follower where they're following the destructive leader because the behavior is camouflaged. The destructive leader is definitely doing things like gaslighting, but the person doesn't know that it's happening. Uh, they don't know they're being manipulated. Um, all these things. So there's different types of followers that do follow the destructive leaders.
Interesting.
Fascinating.
So, as you're digging into this and explaining about these kinds of people who are both leaders and followers here, there's one person that immediately came to my mind, Steve Jobs, where
Mm,
he, like, at least my knowledge of him, he seemed like a very aggressive person towards towards the people that he worked with, but he was able to produce some massive results because of it.
yeah.
So And
Yeah,
maybe in some ways he was a blend between the transformational, where he was very charismatic in some ways, but had a very, oh, what's the right word for it? I guess demanding, like
yeah,
demanding expectations that were definitely too much for some people. At, at the same time, could also be very destructive to many of the people that he followed. So am I sort of on the right track there? That
yeah. You are exactly right. He was both. He was in a lot of the research that I did. His name kept popping up because he was transformational, right? He built that company from nothing to a very successful organization, and yet he would repeatedly, systemically, yell at people, throw things, have tantrums himself. Yeah, very destructive.
mm-hmm. Perhaps there's the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm thinking, well, maybe for companies to get to that extreme level of success, you have to have some like charismatic out there, like sort of whack job leader,
Hmm.
like Elon Musk for another example. Like he is certainly a special kind of person, where you have to be a very particular kind of person to want to work under him.
Yeah.
Where a lot of people, at least from what I've heard, say that uh, he likes the people who are happy to work 14-hour days, 7 days a week, and it's like very perfectionist standard.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's not destructive leadership, and maybe I'm looking too into this, but maybe there is something there of like companies that make it super big have to have some aspect of that. But
Um,
maybe not.
there could be some truth to it, but there's also the truth that there were other leaders besides those two within the companies that would
Mm-hmm.
have influenced others. Plus, we don't really know the number of um, employee turnover. How much employee turnover did those two companies have to deal with that nobody really knows about? Between employee turnover and lack of production, loss of production, those two things cost billions of dollars for companies annually. Just to replace somebody who's making $100,000 a year, regardless of what company they're working at, it's going to cost over $33,000 to replace them and bring the new person up to speed.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's a loss that many nonprofits and even for profits can't afford.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's I don't know, just thoughts popping up in my head. Okay, coming back to more specifics on destructive leadership in
yeah.
particular. So you've touched on this a little bit, but what are some common signs that a leader might be exhibiting some destructive behaviors? Like, say you're walking into a company for the first time, what might be some things that you would look out for?
Uh, the research itself showed a lot of this is interesting because this was a question that I had today when I was giving a presentation, and the research from one person to the next was really varied as to what are the behaviors that make somebody destructive,
All right.
which made it a little bit tough to write about it in that I had to write a lot about it because it wasn't not everyone agreed, so I had to give everyone's opinions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, you're going to see people who are manipulative, they're belittling, they're making them feel less than they are, their followers. Um, and some of that you're not going to see from walking into a store. That would be harder. It's easier to see if you are a part of that organization. For instance, a volunteer might see it. There are over, I can't remember how many nonprofits there are in the US, but there's over 62 million volunteers in the US for nonprofits. There's over 12 million people working for nonprofits. So there's 75 million people somehow engaged with the nonprofit world.
Okay.
And if somebody sees a destructive leader, if somebody is in the hall and they see somebody yelling at somebody day after day after day, throwing things, in some cases, fist fights, like I've already said before, gaslighting, manipulating, if they see that on a systemic, repeated basis, that's going to affect donors giving to the nonprofit. It's going to affect volunteers who no longer want to volunteer there, employees leaving. So those are the kind of behaviors, to answer your question, that you might see if you're closer to the organization.
Mm-hmm.
If I walked into a Target store it might be harder to see destructive leadership.
Okay.
It's just not going to be as pronounced.
So certainly it's something that you basically have to deal with from the inside, or
Yes,
at least maybe not the inside, but having experience with an organization for a longer period of time.
right.
And once again, you've already touched on this a little bit in your last response, but thinking long term on this, what might be some of the long term consequences of destructive leadership for both individuals and an organization, maybe the leader themselves or the organization as a whole? But
Yeah. Well, you like to think that there aren't any long term consequences. But, when I first started doing the research, I wanted to do it on the followers of destructive leaders. But I wasn't able to because the a committee within the school determined that the followers would suffer from too much PTSD or trauma or anxiety in remembering the behaviors. So that's why when I did my research, I interviewed nonprofit board members across the United States who hopefully would be a little bit separate from the CEO or whoever the destructive leader is.
mm-hmm,
Uh, and in many cases, they were away from the organization for years. In some cases, they were still in the organization. Regardless, I was still surprised at how many board members were in tears during the interviews, how many regretted that they didn't report the activity as illegal to the feds, and uh, and that shows that there is ongoing, probably years long trauma, stress, anxiety, perhaps depression that continues with the people who have to deal with the destructive leaders, regardless of what level they're on, whether they're below the destructive leader or above them. So everyone needs some psychological, emotional, mental health assistance if they've had to deal with a destructive leader.
wow, so this can't really go deep. It's not just a money thing.
Right.
Like people's lives can actually be really impacted by the people that they work with.
Yeah.
Which I guess now that I say that out loud, it feels obvious that people you work with are going to impact your life. Do you want to live the kind of life where you come home every day from work and you complain about your boss, like always yelling at you, always doing XYZ thing? Or would you rather come home at night and be, if not happy, but at least satisfied with the day's work?
Yeah.
Oh.
Exactly. Even just for myself, I've seen a number of destructive leaders and I've had some of them as supervisors, and I still suffer from guilt that I didn't help a colleague of mine who was consistently yelled at
Mm-hmm.
in a way that didn't need to happen. Uh, and I've apologized since then, but I still will always just feel guilty that I didn't step in and intervene and stop that behavior.
Mm-hmm. Always have those lingering thoughts in the back of your head every once in a while. It just says,
Yeah,
why? Why did that have to happen?
exactly. Yeah.
And why does this happen? Why do we like I guess in general, why do we have destructive leaders, or why why do these things happen?
Yeah, it's because, and that was the crux of my research. Um, we don't intervene, or we don't know how to intervene. We don't know who should intervene. So in the end, intervening doesn't have to be done by anybody other than whoever is seeing it. It doesn't matter what level of the organization they're on. You need to intervene to stop the behavior. In many cases, people will define intervention as some sort of collaboration between individuals towards something better, which is a great definition. It might be a little bit unrealistic, idealistic.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it's about stopping the behavior. Uh, and even though that can be done by anybody, there's no training ever being done on how do you intervene. Many organizations don't have documentation for how do you intervene. There isn't a 1, 2, 3 step, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some do have it, which is great. It's not a widespread thing at this point, and that's what's missing.
Mm-hmm. Right. So looking at the leaders themselves, why do you have any theories on what turns someone into a destructive leader? Like,
Ooh,
like, if you don't have anything, that's fine. But theory
no,
crafting, love it. I have a few ideas that
right.
just from what you've been saying that uh, there's I have a few ideas that are coming to mind as you've been describing some of these things that go on. One is that that quote of "power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely," where
Hmm.
as people, maybe this isn't the case with all leaders, of course it's not, but I'm going to make a generalized statement because it's easier. As people move up in an organization and become leaders or managers over people, many of them might feel a sense of power or entitlement to do more, to have more destructive behaviors, or maybe it's a systemic thing where the their leaders were once more like had destructive behaviors towards them. So the people who now move up to new leadership positions think this is just how leaders are supposed to act.
Yeah,
This is what they do.
yeah,
And maybe the reason that people don't step up or do anything about it is the whole bystander effect, where it doesn't seem like anyone else is stepping up, so maybe it's normal,
yeah,
or someone else will do it. I don't have to worry about it.
yeah. Mm. You've got all the answers right there, Orion. Since my degree is on business administration, I have to keep my speech at that when I go out and talk to places. But when I was doing the research, there was so much research about why somebody becomes a destructive leader.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're getting into the psychology part, and I had to stay away from the psychology part. And then there's so much research about destructive leaders in education,
Mm-hmm.
with principals and supervisor or what is it above a principal? I
I
just lost it.
general education supervisor. Let's call them that.
Yeah,
Yeah, board of
some
education
sort of yes.
supervisor.
And then there's so much research in the military
Mm-hmm.
of what makes somebody a destructive leader, and I had to keep all of that out of my research, even though it was fun to read.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, and from what I read, it's exactly what you said. It's learned behavior, something that they're copying. Of course, it's nothing you're born with. Um, but yeah, it's something that they're learning to do to either get ahead or to be successful or to make themselves look good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating. The more that you look at why people do things, you're gonna run into psychology everywhere. I've kind of
Yeah.
just accepted that, where
Yeah.
it's just you got to accept it, got to dig into it a bit,
Yes.
even if it's
Yes.
a little beyond your realm of expertise.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So,
Which is why actually on my website, I have a resources page because I don't want anybody to come to me for therapy.
mm-hmm.
I, I'm not that type of doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I do have some other friends who are therapists, and I do recommend if you've been a part of a destructive leader's behavior in any way, you should see a therapist.
Mm-hmm. So, speaking more about like what people can do, what can people do? How can individuals within an organization start to recognize signs of destructive leadership early on? Or, oh, yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, kind of like dementia or depression or suicide, destructive leaders is a tough conversation to talk about. It's very tricky, and people don't want to talk about it. They don't even want to believe it exists, like the other things. So let's first advocate for just talking about it. Get myself to your organization, contact somebody else who knows about destructive leaders, start talking about it in your committees, your departments and divisions. If we just start using the phrase more, which has been around since 1938, it's pre World War II, it's nothing new. Let's start using it for what it is and talking about it, bringing it out in the open.
Wow, I'm
So it's
kind of surprised by that because gonna be honest, I have not heard about, I did not hear the term destructive leadership until I
ah
met you and started talking about it with you.
right. See, it needs
Mm-hmm.
to be. I didn't hear about it until I started my doctoral program.
Mm-hmm. And even with my leadership classes, like no one touched on it. We talked about
Right.
other leadership styles and other leadership things, but nothing about destructive leadership or bad leadership.
Yes, or even toxic leadership, probably,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little bit more popular. Toxic leadership, but
Mm.
it's the same thing.
Just because people love the word toxic, love to throw it in front of
Yes.
everything.
Yes, exactly. So one thing is the first thing to do is to start talking about it. And what I don't want it to turn into is a witch hunt. We shouldn't go looking for the people who have it. We should simply be doing our work, our everyday things. And if there are people who are exhibiting the behavior that is painful to us, uh, that causes us to cry in the car as we drive home, that causes us to feel fear when we're sitting at our desks, then we know that we've got a problem with a destructive leader. So then I recommend that you talk with your HR person. Um, every organization needs some sort of human resources resource, maybe not within the campus, maybe not within the confines of the building, but someone where you can go to and determine what are your legal rights, what are your emotional and psychological needs, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing to think of is my research was based on interviewing board members, and what they all said when I was researching them, when I was interviewing them, was there needs to be alternate pathways of communication about the destructive leader. So if you are a vice president of an organization and your destructive leader is the president, and then you've got a board above the president, the vice president's only option is to go to the destructive leader and tell them about the destructive behavior, which the destructive leader is then supposed to tell the board, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that
So
seems
there
a
needs to
little bit like
be
a catch 22, maybe.
yes, so there needs to be alternate pathways so that you can go around the destructive leader and get help from the level above or two levels above, whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. So
Yep.
start talking about it more. Be just aware of it, your surroundings, not actively hunting it down. Because
No.
we know that if you are trying to look for something, you're going to find it.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's not there, humans are very good at finding things that they want to see.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then trying to, like, if that does happen, if you are in that sort of situation, going out to like see what your options are. If you do have someone you can go to in HR or in some part of the company, and
Mm-hmm.
just trying to find those resources. That's the big thing that people
Yes.
need to start figuring out and start learning about.
Right. Yes. And just like anything, we all need further training.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you've got a bachelor's, a master's, a doctorate, everybody can learn more. You'll never finish learning.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes board members and other leaders of the organization. They should continue learning. Board members should learn what their fiduciary duties are. They should learn how to do conflict management. They should learn how to amend their bylaws so that they can include destructive leadership interventions within their bylaws. Board members should continue their education while they're board members.
Mm-hmm. Of course, I always advocate for more education. Like
Mm-hmm.
every day, everyone should be learning something new. Should have
Yes.
at least one new thought a day.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So digging a bit deeper into what people can do about destructive leaders, what are maybe some specific strategies that people can try to well that people can try out
Yeah.
to like, either address or mitigate some negative effects of destructive leadership, whether that be on an individual level or on a organizational level?
Yes. And again, visit your HR person or your therapist for this too. But here's what the research says, and my conversations with them
Mm-hmm.
is one of the best things you can do is simply step in the middle, because the whole purpose is to stop the behavior, right? So if one person is yelling at another person, get in the middle. And here's another word that nobody's going to like, but use love. Love totally belongs in a business. It belongs in a corporation. The word it deserves to be said out loud, and work with love and kindness and gentleness to first of all diffuse the situation. Just talk calmly to the person, and then you'll probably want to do some one-on-one with the destructive leader, perhaps one-on-one with a follower, determine where is the problem and how can we resolve this.
Mm-hmm.
The solution, in my opinion, is not always getting rid of the destructive leader, but that's because I believe that people can change. Now, if you look at the research, you'll find that that's not always true. Most research will say get rid of the destructive leader, find a way to fire them, and unfortunately, that does happen. But I also believe that people can change depending on how things are approached and how they're treated. So,
Of course, it's
so
a situation by situation thing you got to do.
it totally is. Yes, it's hard to have black and white for this. So getting in the middle, speaking with love, doing some one-on-one. If one-on-one doesn't work, you kind of have to do a group thing. Maybe there'll be a series of other colleagues who can, with you, kind of create like an intervention circle with the destructive leader, saying, these steps aren't working either. What can we do to help you get past this? And so almost making the destructive leader a victim of their behavior, right?
Okay.
Uh, but again, there will be times when it's just not going to work, and then you kind of have to help them out.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean help them out of the company.
Right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So I love what you're saying here. I think it's great, but I see one, maybe two big problems with it, and
Okay.
that is the idea of fear. That
Yeah.
we talked about this a little bit earlier of the bystander effect of people don't like to be the one in the spotlight. Even people who are extroverts, typically they don't want to be in the spotlight in this kind of situation
Right.
where they're the ones stepping up and either standing up to the destructive leader or protecting the follower that they
Yeah.
might be harming, or even if they're the ones being harmed themselves, being willing to step up and really like say you can't do that, or trying to help out here.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it might be a little out of your wheelhouse for this, but let's push some boundaries a bit.
Yeah.
What are some ideas that we have to like maybe boost that confidence a bit more to say I am willing to stand up and try to fight back against this. I'm willing to go out and try to do this thing. How can we try to build up some confidence in people to say I want to protect not just myself and my job and my mental health, but like the people around me that I'm working with.
Yeah. And that fear is such a real thing, and it is. Sometimes it stops you in your tracks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, especially since so many times the destructive leaders, if somebody approaches them, they they may seek revenge,
Mm-hmm.
right?
New victim.
Yeah, exactly. So it's tough. My answer to that is uh, just like it depends on the destructive leader, it depends on the person who is wanting to do the intervention. I think the intervention style will come with the person style.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, somebody who is an introvert and they are uh, being bullied by a destructive leader, they are probably not the one who should be doing the interventions because they might not have the correct, like you said, the courage to talk to the person, to stand up to the person. So, in cases like that, it would behoove them to develop the trust of somebody else, another leader in the organization, who can perhaps on the side look for that behavior and identify it, corroborate with it, and and then that could be the person who can step in and do the intervening.
Mm-hmm. So perhaps to be an information gatherer of sorts of
Yes.
like this person is a destructive leader. Here's times and places of things that they've done. I've written down over a certain period of time to say
Yeah.
they've done these things. Here's my evidence. I have people who can corroborate it. So more of a ghost in the machine, if you will. Someone standing back and maybe I don't know if pulling the strings is the best way to put it, but is collecting information to help other people to stand up to them or to
Yeah.
present to other people who are more willing to do so.
Yeah. And there is no pulling of strings because it is repetitive. It's
Mm-hmm.
really just waiting because it will happen again,
Mm-hmm.
that behavior. Yeah. So it's being aware because maybe they are not aware of this person and their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's brought to light by somebody else within the organization and they themselves then are a leader, they can watch for the behavior and they can document it, and then they can take steps for interventions from there.
Mm-hmm. A lot of it is just coming down to finding the right person
Yeah.
who can really do something about it.
Right. Yes. Hmm.
That makes sense.
For instance, I'm working with a company right now where this person has a destructive leader on the same level of them, but they don't want it brought to light uh, how do I say this properly?
Hmm.
It's a tricky situation,
Hmm.
right?
It
Um,
always is.
and and we know that it'll be worse if this person is singled out. So rather than singling this person out, we're going to start with me talking to a larger group of people where this person will be a member.
Okay.
And hopefully this person will compare their own behavior with the behaviors that I talk about and the behaviors that make people afraid, and maybe we'll change their behaviors accordingly. So that's one first step that we're going to do. And then if that doesn't work, then we have to be a little bit more face to face.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So taking a slow, step-by-step approach,
Yes.
or starting out big and funneling down if you have to.
Yes.
That makes
Absolutely.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So all throughout this, we've been talking about different kinds of leaders, like servant leaders, transformational, destructive leaders. That's all great. But what about when we become leaders ourselves? How can we become better leaders?
Oh, great question that nobody's ever asked me. Well, we get back to education. There's a lot of research out there, not even research. You can go to a book at a library, you can go to a book at a bookstore, and there's so many books that talk about great types of leadership. I've got on my desk right here, here's one that's called Love is Just Damn Good Business by Stephen Farber. I didn't get his permission to talk about his. Uh, and here's
Hey,
another one
book
called,
recommendation, go ahead.
yeah, another one called Love Leadership on my desk that I still have to read. I just spoke with this author yesterday, a friend of mine, Rosella Haiti White, who wrote Love Big, The Power of Revolutionary Relationships to Heal the World. There's so many resources out there to teach people how to be the type of leader that your organization needs to accomplish their mission.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, looking specifically at the skills and qualities, what might be some good skills and qualities that leaders should really focus on developing, especially if they want to avoid falling into destructive leadership patterns?
Yeah. Well, first of all, well, maybe not first of all, let me give you the top three.
Yeah.
They need to know how to listen. And hearing is different from listening, right?
Yep.
uh, you've really got to just be quiet. I was in a meeting with a couple of colleagues once. They both reported to me, and I was listening to them, and I thought the conversation was going right, and then finally one of them said, "You're not listening to me," and I will never forget that. Because maybe you feel like you're listening, but you're really not. You need to listen to hear what they're saying, not only verbally, but maybe even read between the lines a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
then in doing that listening, the second one is being empathetic. Are you putting yourself in their shoes? Um, which is really, really tough for some people to do, especially if you are a leader who's way high up in the organization, maybe in the C suite. It's hard to put yourself in the shoes of somebody in the mailroom, for
Mm-hmm.
instance. Um, but I also believe that somebody in the mailroom has the right to speak with somebody in the C suite. So let's listen to each other. And then the third thing, which just goes right around with love, but I think people are sometimes afraid to talk about love in a corporation, is kindness. Are you simply being kind to each other? Are you treating each other with kindness? Are you making decisions based on kindness? And do you carry yourself with kindness so that people know that you're safe to come up to?
Mm-hmm.
Those are my top three.
All three great skills, and I would have to agree.
Yeah.
Most people don't think of love and capitalism in the same sentence.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
So,
I'm never talking about romantic love. I'm talking about, brotherly
of
love,
course,
right?
the
Yes,
plutonic, the professional, the
exactly.
yeah.
Yep.
Though certain businesses, probably there is a place for the romantic kind.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Digging a bit more into these individual skills we can learn, any advice that you have for how we can maybe start developing it? Let's start with listening. Any advice or ideas on how we can start working on like developing this skill to be able to actually sit down and just listen to people? Because we are all distracted all the time, and it's like you said, we often hear things but we don't listen.
Yeah. the best advice I actually got from an older brother of mine, Jim Langemo. He told me that when people come into his office, he doesn't necessarily shut the door. That's not the point, but he won't answer a ringing phone. He won't look at his cell phone. If somebody else comes in, he won't ignore that person, but he'll say, I'm with somebody else. So the whole point is the person you're in front of listening, right now, they're the most important person in the world.
Hmm.
That's it. Your whole focus is on them. And that's what makes the listening work. Because then they feel important. They feel like you're giving them the respect that they need and the time that they need, and again, a safe place to talk.
Hmm. It's all about setting priorities in the moment of,
Yeah,
am I going to make this person a priority right now? And if that phone in your pocket starts buzzing, I know many people who instantly their brain switches to lizard brain mode. They take out their phone, like, oh, sorry, you're not, like, what that says to someone who's talking to them is, sorry, you're not as important to me right now as this phone call or as this notification that I might be
yeah,
getting.
yeah. I can't tell you how many times I had somebody in my office and I'm listening to them empathetically, and the phone rings and they stop. They're like, "Aren't you going to answer that?" And I say, "No, you're in front of me right now. I want to pay attention to you."
Hmm.
Yeah, and that wows them.
It's almost become trained to us now that we must be surgically attached to these cellular devices at all
Hmm.
points in time and that they take number one priority in our lives.
And not just cellular ones, but regular office phones too. If you're in a corporate setting,
Hmm.
there should be a way to mute those, and there isn't always a way, but there should be a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well. Moving on to empathy. What about trying to develop this skill? Since I know personally I'm not known for my skills of empathy. Like I can fake it pretty well for the most part, but
Hmm.
actually trying to develop this as a skill. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone actually call empathy a skill, but how might we
Yeah.
go about trying to work on this?
I think empathy is a little bit tougher, and the way that I got better at it was two things. One was traveling. I think if you realize that you're not alone in this world and that there are whole different cultures from yours, and you're able to compare your cultures and compare what you eat and how you dress and all of those things, I think you're able to open up your mind a little bit more to what other people might be thinking. And then the other is being able to converse like you and I are. Uh, the, we know so many different factions on this planet where they just won't talk to each other. We know families where siblings won't talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we need to get to a place where we're maybe not comfortable, but at least are willing to talk to each other. And I think that opens up that empathy, because then you can kind of get what's inside their brain then.
Mm-hmm. I would absolutely agree with you on that. An exercise I think about that I don't remember where I heard this, but it was a few years back that it didn't have anything to do with empathy, but as you were talking about your ideas just now, it came to mind for me that
Hmm.
a great a great example of maybe an exercise someone can do is to go to a mall or go to a public place and walk around and just watch people for a second
Yeah.
and try to think about, oh, that person who just walked by, they have their own thoughts, they have their own hopes and dreams, they have their own problems, they have their own whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's something that we don't think about very often. That
Right.
you walk by who knows how many hundreds of people every single day, and every single one of them has their own individual hopes, dreams, desires, fears, families, friends, interests, whatever, that
Yeah.
are totally just unknown to us. And we don't think about it because we're always so tucked into our own heads.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. And then finally, moving on to the love and compassion, kindness aspect of how can we maybe work on that? 'Cause,
Oh my goodness. I don't know. There's so many different. You could attribute that to religion. You could attribute that to your upbringing. You could attribute that to your politics. There's so many different ways that people attribute. How do you learn kindness? How did you get that way? Uh, I think you have to practice kindness.
Hmm.
I'd like to say that it comes naturally, but I don't know if kindness comes naturally to everyone like the other things. But I might be getting too deep and philosophical too. I don't know.
Hey, that's just fine. I'm happy with deep philosophy here.
Yeah.
But
Um,
I think I would have to agree with you on that. That you do have to go forth with intention to say, I want to be a kinder individual. I may not know what that looks like currently, but I want to make this improvement.
yeah.
And maybe it's going out and asking for people's advice to say, what could I do to be kinder? Or to
Yeah.
just ask directly to say, what would what would make me a kinder person?
Yeah. It's the whole practice of what's one nice thing you can do for someone today.
Mm-hmm.
That alone is hard for people to do.
Mm-hmm.
To do one nice thing for someone, because who is the someone? What is the one nice thing I'm going to do? They have to think about that
Mm-hmm.
rather than, I don't know, maybe than 1950s old days where people would just automatically be baking muffins and hand them off to everyone in the neighborhood. I think it's just a different culture now that we're in,
Mm-hmm.
where it might be harder to do nice things.
We're in a very individualistic culture where people stay out of each other's business, whether it's for good or for
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, but definitely kindness is something that you just have to go out and kind of just try.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe not the best advice, but just go out and try, experiment.
I personally believe that we're all supposed to love each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I try to focus on. How are you loving somebody? Which doesn't mean that you are, uh, head in the clouds, kind of. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but like a Barbie love. It's a I like your word, compassionate. It's a compassionate. How can you hold that person in your heart?
Mm-hmm.
Love. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Perhaps another term that might be better than Barbie love, is one that my. So I was talking with my stats professor the other day, and of course, so we're recording this on Valentine's Day. So of course we were
Yes.
recently talking about like the statistics of love, and perhaps a better term might be the idea of magic love, where it's like this perfect envisionment of like love and romance and whatever in your mind.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, stepping away from that for a bit. Uh, what are some other like unexpected skills? So as you've developed as a leader, what are some unexpected skills that have either helped you become a better leader or have helped you that you developed in leadership outside of leadership positions? I can gladly rephrase that if that didn't make sense because I don't know if it made sense to me.
Sure. Well, actually, I'd like to hear you rephrase it. Yeah, go for it.
So, first question was, what were unexpected skills that help you better as a leader? Actually, yeah, that is the main question I wanted to go
Yeah.
with. So, what are some
Hmm.
unexpected skills that have helped you as a leader or helped you shape and support leaders?
Uh, this might be a strange answer, but let me give it a shot. I have spent the majority of my life being an introvert, but I believe that being a leader and helping people get up the rungs of their ladder has made me more extroverted. I've always been kind of on the line, but I've been on the introverted side. I think it's made me more extroverted, which has also then given me the confidence that I need uh, to even talk about this stuff, to even do this interview with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other skill that I've helped, which I'm going to give this to well, the previous good supervisors I've had in the past, is focusing on the mission, which would not have been important to me in my 20s. But now, later, I realize that it's the mission that influences my leadership style. It's the mission that influences my drive, even my own mission for my business, to make sure that people are able to work at a place without being afraid. That's not the spoken mission itself, but that's the mission behind the mission, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, those are unexpected things that have come my way that I've learned to work with and accept and use.
Yeah, fair enough. So
Mm-hmm.
now this is the question I was going for. So going the other way now of what are some skills that you developed as a leader that have helped you outside the world of leadership? Like some unexpected skills you developed as a leader or studying leadership that have helped you far beyond just being a leader.
Yeah. A couple of different things come to mind. First is simply my friendships. I have some very, very close friends, and I think that being a leader has helped me listen to my friends better.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been rather empathetic, but I really think that I actively listen to what they're saying differently than I would have when I was a teenager, right? And then the other facet is, this whole confidence idea. On the side, I'm a substitute organist at churches because there's such a shortage of organists in the Twin Cities and pianists. So if an organist is gone on vacation or sick or something, they'll call me up and I'll play at whichever church. And the old me would have been frightened to do such a thing and wouldn't have put myself out there. And my leadership skills have taught me outside of that business arena uh, to enjoy playing the organ, playing the piano, and helping people sing to their heart's content.
Mm-hmm. It's really helped you be able to step out of your comfort zone more to say,
Yeah,
I've done these great things as a leader. Maybe I can take some of that and apply it to other aspects of my life to
yeah,
step up and be more present or more, as you were saying earlier, you do more servant leadership style stuff. And to me, it sounds like you sort of expand that out now more into giving to different communities, to giving to different people more so than perhaps you would have before.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. So we're nearing the end here. Got one or two, maybe three more questions for you.
sure. Ask anything.
Yeah. So let's go to a hypothetical situation where I'm working my way up in the business world, and I just made it to my first real leadership position. I cannot talk today, and it's going
That's
great.
okay.
What's some advice you would give to emerging leaders to ensure that they develop into positive and effective leaders rather than falling into those destructive patterns that we talk about?
Yeah. First of all, give yourself time and grace and patience. Uh, you do not have to be perfect at your role right away. Take some time to learn what your duties are and uh, what your goals are and how you're going to get to those goals. Then, if you are really in a leadership position and you've got people reporting to you, get to know your people and get to know the people below them. Uh, they're your teammates. They are the ones that are going to help you succeed. They're the ones that are going to help you get your goals. So it's not all on your shoulders. It's all about collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Absolutely, I would agree with you on that. Oftentimes, like I said before, we get so caught up in our own heads doing our own thing that we kind of forget that we're not alone in doing whatever it is we're doing for the most
Right,
part.
right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
If I can make a off-topic plug here for something, then
go for
I
it.
highly believe in cross training. So if you're really going to be a leader, make sure that different people know how to do the same tasks so that people can go on vacation.
Mm-hmm. That's also something that I vouch for and agree with. That's part of the whole premise of this podcast to teach people about a wide variety of skills and being able to do different things because
Yeah,
by skill stacking and learning how to do a wide variety of things, you're able to be more effective, more helpful,
yeah,
more involved in a wide variety of things.
yes.
So, with all that said, are there any last pieces of advice that you have for our aspiring leaders or anything big that we might have missed that you think we should cover now?
Just realize that no matter what leader you are, no matter where you are or what organization you're with, learn more. Don't be content with what you know. Keep learning and use consultants for what you need. The consultants are out there. They've got the knowledge and they are keeping up to date. They're current. and they're willing to help. So get further education for your team, for your department, for your boards. Don't sit and be static. That's
Hmm.
it.
Wonderful. Dr. Langemo, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today. Where can people go to hear more from you or work with you or anything else that you want to plug or talk about here?
Sure. My company is called Long Meadow Leadership. So simply www.longmeadowleadership.com. My email address is on the website. My phone number is on the website. I've got other resources. You can go there and come and visit.
Great. All links will be put down in the show notes if you're interested. And it's been a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure on my end too. Appreciate it.
Hey, listener. If you enjoyed this episode, one, thank you so much for listening to it all the way through. We greatly appreciate it. And two, please share this episode with a friend you think will like it or share it on social media. With all that said, thanks for listening. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later. Ciao.